pero me duele mucho.
With great uncertainty, 19-year-old Stephanie Maya was taken to an emergency in 2020 in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the most disastrous in recent years, which we still have fresh in our memory and in the saddest memories of our lives, where some more than others have had to live very closely.
19.
As is the case of this girl, that's 6 months before everything was different for Ella, when suddenly a series of pimples had sprouted on her face, which seemed to be normal for adolescents, but it was not like that, and although she did everything possible to hide them with makeup, she did not imagine what she would have to go through.
¿Sabes la dirección? Stephanie?
By then she did not believe in God, and she was not clear about what she wanted in life. Even though she was part of a club, she still didn't know what her goal was in this world, as it happens with the majority of young people today who, due to a lack of orientation, do not know the true meaning of life. One day Stephanie was exercising with the group on the club's pitch, when she suddenly began to feel a few stitches of pain throughout her body, but she continues to carry out her routine, until she became unbearable. She couldn't take it anymore and she moved away from the group, falling to the ground tense with pain.
¿Estás bien? ¿Qué te pasó?
When she is immediately taken to the hospital to do the corresponding checkup, they discover a disease called lupus, which has no cure, and those pimples that had sprouted on her face are nothing more than a reaction to the disease.
No tiene cura.
Esos no son granitos. Tú tienes lupus.
His father, very concerned, gives him a notebook so that he can record in it everything that is happening, or if he prefers, take the Bible and write some reflections. His father makes it clear that it is only advice that he gives him, because he did the same when he wasn't well, and that helped him a lot, since sometimes difficulties can help other people to reflect and find meaning in life. But she has nothing to write, so together with her father she dedicates herself to pray, where she asks God to protect her from herself, since lupus is an autoimmune disease, which means that her own defenses she attacks them. Stephanie is encouraged to write in the notebook after Diane contacted her, since she is a girl who suffered from lupus like her, and shows her that with this disease you can still have a normal life and fulfill the mission that is destined for us.
¿Piensas que no podemos llevar una vida normal?
In February 2020, Stephanie showed what was written to her father. By that time the first case of COVID-19 had appeared in her country, and people were terrified. This is how the days passed. Stephanie kept writing, while the disease was controlled. However, on March 13, 2020, she had to be admitted to the hospital due to a relapse.
Recomiendo que no entre.
In the hospital, the fear of the doctors in the face of the terrible pandemic that was coming was noticeable. Everyone has already begun to protect themselves with a mask in the face of this health threat that had never been experienced before, since 3 months ago the virus appeared in China, and it was spreading rapidly throughout the world, so Stephanie recorded it in her notebook. As the entire city is in chaos due to the relentless COVID-19, and in the face of the terror that someone in the family could bring the virus home and thus infect Stephanie, everyone remains in quarantine until a cure is found for the deadly virus, as the number of people losing their lives is increasing disproportionately every day. And since Stephanie is one of the many people at high risk, she remains isolated with her mother in a room in the house, which is why she has not yet been able to personally meet her friend Diane, and even more so now that she is in remission phase, which means that your disease is currently without symptoms, which is why you should be more careful not to expose yourself to the virus, since any factor can be a trigger for it to reactivate again. Stephanie, taking advantage of the time of confinement, she writes a list of daily tasks in her notebook every day, where there is a specific one, which is to go to the mission with Diane when the pandemic ends. This is the most important thing to her, and as time goes by she can't wait for her wish to come true.
Veo que estás mucho mejor.
Later, Stephanie shows her father the notebook again, where she attests to being a believer in Jesus and the love he gives to all those who believe in her name.
Está genial, hija.
Due to the pandemic situation in which the country is living at that time, and unable to call meetings, Stephanie chooses to speak in front of a crowd of people through a group video call.
Cristo viene.
Amén.
And from there, he helps many who, immersed in their problems, feel lost and without seeing any solution, just as he helped Bia when she wrote to Stephanie to tell her that she wanted to end her life.
No, amiga, va a salir todo bien.
Once again, Stephanie began to feel sick to her stomach, but she did not pay attention to it. She soon felt better and went to visit Diane, where they planned to one day go to the mission as professionals, Stephanie in aesthetics and Diane in psychology. Stephanie tells Diane that he is writing some messages for humanity, for when everything returns to normal, and confesses that he is very grateful because thanks to her he began to write in her book.
Así que gracias. Oh.
Days later, Stephanie begins to have a fever, and as a precaution she is taken to the hospital to do some tests, including the COVID-19 test, which turns out to be positive. Although Stephanie's desire is to be on the front lines helping in the pandemic, she must now be in the isolated rear fighting for her life. She is now in the midst of a pandemic when she is taken to a hospital full of people infected with this deadly virus. It is there that she begins a real agony for everyone. Her mother, very sad and scared, continues to write on the blank pages of her notebook, and when she reads it, she realizes her daughter's courage. Meanwhile, her father prays before everyone for the health of her daughter, so that she can fulfill her greatest dream of becoming a good missionary and being able to spread the word of Jesus. In her notebook it is also written how Stephanie with great humility accepts the plans that God has for her, trusting fully in Him. The whole group asks for news about Stephanie's state of health, but her mother only limits herself to answering that they pray for her. In a very short time, her prayers for her health increase. The days continue to pass, and everyone continues to pray and ask for Stephanie's health, since her situation continues to be very delicate. This is how the doctor tells her father in a video call, explaining her diagnosis in detail, which is not encouraging. Well, she has all her organs compromised, her lungs, her kidneys, and now only 10% of her heart works. Immediately they allow her father to enter to see Stephanie. When he sees his daughter in that state, he feels immense pain in his chest and, unable to contain his tears, asks God with all his heart to get his daughter out of there, but if it is not his will, then what, put her to rest once and for all and don't make her suffer anymore. At night, his father confesses to his wife that when he saw his girl in that state he despaired, but now he is calm, because he knows that God heard his prayers. On the other hand, the whole group asks about Stephanie's health. Her mother only limits herself to answering that they pray for her. So soon, prayers for her health were rapidly increasing. At night, 2 hours after Stephanie's parents went to sleep, they receive a phone call saying that they have to take her daughter's documents to the hospital, without giving any further information. The father immediately realizes that God has granted him what he has asked so much for his daughter. Crying inconsolably, and with a broken heart, he hugs his wife, affirming that whoever believes in God does not have to fear death. The COVID-19 pandemic was the worst of all time, and it took something from each one of us, and the saddest and most terrifying thing is knowing that this pandemic has even denied us the right to say goodbye to our loved ones. Stephanie was just a girl and her parents could not say goodbye to her when she lost her life. Her mother informs Diane that it is no longer necessary to pray, because her daughter has finally rested. Her friends at the club tell her father how much they miss Stephanie. Days later the club organized a tribute to Stephanie, where everyone attends with their vehicles. Parents upon arrival join the line. Faced with so much pain, her father begins by giving some nice words in honor of her daughter, through a video call, since due to the pandemic they had to remain isolated, where no one could give a comforting hug. Minutes later, the vehicles start up in a caravan, honking their horns, saying goodbye to Stephanie. This is the summary of a Christian movie based on real events called I No Longer Live. Click here and do not miss the next story.